Good afternoon and welcome to Tree Talk episode 135 with myself, Jack Neville, and Matt O'Callaghan of the Weekly Observer and Vale Star. We have so much to get through today, Matt. We're looking forward to the quarterfinals in the Senior, Intermediate and Junior Football Championships. We have the second round of the Ladies Football Championships to come. We're looking back on the knockout stages for the Hurling were confirmed over the weekend. We had the first round of the Camogie Championship, and as always, we have our predictions, so do stay tuned.
The impression of the game you get out with what you put into it. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word go today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high. He's put it over.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Before we get into the cut and thrust, you're laughing again. Before we get into the cut and thrust of the sport weekend, Matt, I'm just actually looking back on the podcast. I've just noticed I've never actually asked how you are any week, even though I don't see you one of the week next. So how have you been keeping, Matt? I suppose we'll start with.
I've been keeping very well, Jack. I have been keeping very well. As you know, I was down in your beautiful part of the neck of the woods on Sunday. I've been keeping very well. And do you know something, Jack? I went down to Ballysteen on Sunday with a spring in my step because I was just after witnessing my beloved Glenroe beating Drummond and qualifying for the county semi-final for a second year in a row. And it's not so much the victory, but the manner in which they achieved it, because I would have given long odds at halftime that Glenroe would be contesting the semi-final. They were extremely poor in the first half, but they really showed their mettle in the second half, and it was a great win. So I went down to your beautiful neck of the woods. I hadn't been down as far as Ballysteen. I've been in Neskeaton quite often, but didn't make my way to Ballysteen for quite a long time until last Sunday. And I must say that I'm hugely impressed by your facilities down there. Well done. You have a lovely setup down there, and you have to be credited for that. But of course, as you know, what my business down there was to launch this wonderful book by your clubmate Paul Anglem. Yeah. And as you can see, you can't quite see behind me here at the minute, but there are books everywhere. I'm at the stage of I'll nearly have to start storing books on my knee now, Jack. I have so many of them. But an awful lot of them are club histories, and I would be very, very interested in them. But this, not because I was involved in the launch of it, Jack. This is a very, very special production. Trust me, because it's as comprehensive a history as I have ever read of a GA club, insofar as that it captures right from pre-GA days back to about the mid-1860s, 70s. It captures the role and the part that GA has played in the community and the importance of it. Sometimes these productions can get carried away with series of facts and listing we won the Junior B first round in such and such a year and such a date and such a place, and that's all very fine and that's all contained in herein. But you know, if it's a club history extending to 450 pages, which says it all, painstakingly and lovingly researched by Paul Anglem, which was a labour of love. And obviously, if you're from Ballysteen, it will be of huge interest to you. But I would suggest that this volume is of anybody that's interested in GA clubs, you know, and the progress of GA clubs and how GA clubs have, stood the test of time through 137 years since the foundation of the Ballysteen Club. This is the book that is absolutely, it's a perfect example of what an excellent club history is. This is one that Paul can be extremely proud of. And of course, ye as the members of the Ballysteen and Askeaton clubs can also be very, very proud of it, Jack. But it just doesn't have traction in Askeaton and Ballysteen. I think this deserves a wider audience, and I couldn't highly recommend it enough. For the sake of €20, amount of copy in it, the amount of imagery in it, the amount of information that's in it. Absolutely fantastic, and full credit to Paul.
Yeah, the huge credit goes out to Paul Anglum. I actually have mine here with me as well, just sitting on the desktop. But I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Matt. It was a pleasure listening to you. Your knowledge of the history of GA and the history of Ireland in general is incredible. And one of the boys actually said it to me. He just turned to me at one stage and he goes, "Matt has some vocabulary. The words you're using, I didn't understand at all." And that just says
they were specially to baffle you, Jack.
Well, I was definitely baffled, but it was a great day. And look, again, a huge thank you to you. That book is actually on sale in Centra and Askeaton, Moran's Hardware Shop in Askeaton. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm sure we can hook you up with one. There's only a limited edition, as you said. Obviously, it's a special connection for me being from Ballysteen, but it is definitely a collector's item for any Limerick GA fan. But again, just
absolutely, that's the point I'm making. And there are a lot of people, and I spoke to one or two collectors who were there at the launch, and you probably saw them there, well-known collectors of this kind of archival material, and particularly club histories. And they were singing from the same hymn sheet that I was singing, waxing lyrical about it. This is a special production, Jack. Trust me, it really is. Like it's compelling reading from the time you pick it up. Now, I got a copy of it. I got an advanced copy of it, obviously, because I had the privilege of doing the launch and had to get dug into it. But you'd say you'd spend, I'll give 10 minutes, a half an hour to this, and not possible. To stretch and stretch and stretch. It hooks you in. It's an excellent production.
Yeah, I found myself eating breakfast the other day, and it was 45 minutes had passed, and I didn't even realise. But I suppose that's enough for Ballysteen for this part. We'll get into it with the Dare game coming along. But we'll
be talking about Ballysteen. I better be very, very careful, as Alan Keogh reminded me on Sunday.
Yeah, you've gone against us a few times now. It's time to change our tune, I think. But look, the Limerick Senior Football Championship quarterfinals are the main attraction this weekend. Obviously, every team has had a 3-week break. We'll start in order of sequence of how they're going to be played over the weekend. We'll look into the intermediate championship ones when we're doing our predictions later on, and we'll have a quick glance at the junior A. Look, we'd love to go through every game this weekend because there's so many, but because there's so many, you can only give time to a certain few. And when you're at a quarterfinal stage of a senior championship, it has to take precedence. So Monaleen versus Father Casey's in the LIT Gaelic grounds on Friday evening at 7:30. I suppose two teams that probably are thinking they should be there every single year and probably haven't been as good as we expected. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, Jack, you're absolutely right there. Two teams that think that they should be there every year, and if their performance at underage was the criterion or the benchmark to go by, they should be there. But that's not the way it has happened. Like we have to go back to 2016 since Monaleen last won the championship. We have to go back 10 years further since Father Casey's won it, which to me is one of the great enigmas and the great mysteries about Limerick football, because they've had such a level of success, particularly at minor level. And in many ways, I liken them to the Galway hurlers, who don't seem to be able to translate minor success into even under 21 and adult success. Well, certainly not under 21 to the same degree anyway. This is a very interesting game now. All the pointers and all the forum would suggest Monaleen. They were very, very impressive in the group stages. They had a good win. They had very good win over Cahan. I think in the second first round, and then they had a big win over Ballylanders. Now it wasn't just a win over Ballylanders, not the margin for that matter, but it was the significance of it. And I think we spoke about this earlier in a previous podcast, Jack, that Ballylanders were a bogey team for Monaleen. For the last 3 years, this was the fourth year in the championship, the fourth year in a row that they had met in the championship. Ballylanders had won the previous 3, but by God, there wasn't any doubt. Now, they were very, very tight in all occasions. I think there was 2 1-point wins and a 2-point win. But by God, it didn't come down to the wire this time. Monaleen made sure of that. Now, I saw Monaleen as far back now as I saw them in the league final against Newcastle West, and I was hugely impressed with what I saw. I was very, very impressed with they're a team in transition, Jack. You know, there are a lot of new faces in it, and I think what really impressed me about them was the manner first of all, in which they won the league, the manner in which they beat Newcastle West, but they beat Newcastle West without Donal O'Sullivan, and we know what Donal O'Sullivan brings to the table, and they were half the game without Brian Donovan. Now Brian Donovan did come in, and he did make a notable contribution, and you know, but I was hugely impressed by him. But so much for Monaleen. For the Cases now in the group stages, big win over Galway, and then they met their old rivals, Newcastle West, and really Newcastle West hit him for 6 early on, and they weren't able to recover. Like we're saying every year, like is this going to be Father Casey's year? And like it isn't that they're not. It isn't that they're not bringing the players through, like, because they brought in the last 2 years they have brought through at least 4 or 5 of those top minors, but they seem not to be able to transition it to senior now. You know, perhaps there's a certain level of impatience, that you know, that an expectation maybe of instant results if you put in a plethora of players that won county minor championships, and in some cases players that won a couple of them, that you get immediate response. It doesn't work like that, but they've been doing that for a while now. And they don't seem to be getting any nearer. It's as I say, it's an enigma for me and mystery for me, because, you know, you would say to yourself that they probably have a pool of players to die for.
Yeah.
But that is not the case, unfortunately, for the Abbeyfield men. So, are you keeping the predictions to last, Jack?
Yeah, I'll hold you off on predictions. You can take your time, because you seem to be on the fence already. We're only the first game in and you're on the fence, but
No, I'm not on the fence. No, I'm not on the fence in this one. But I'm just saying. Do you want me to make the prediction now, or what I think, or do you want me to wait?
We'll wait till the end. We can just go through the games, and I think for Father Casey's sake, could it be? I don't know. Is having too many good players ever a problem? But do players get unhappy if they're starting on minor teams and they don't make the transition straight away? It could be a factor, but. Like, one way or the other, Monaleen and Father Casey's, one of these teams is going to be into the semi-final. And I think once they can kind of get that far, that they'll be a real threat to whoever they play. They'll obviously be a draw. But moving on into...
Yeah, well, you see, for one of them, come Friday evening, they're going to be kind of a step further than they were last year.
Yeah.
Because both of them were beaten in the semi-final last year. Ballylanders, as I said, beat Monaleen, and some crowd down in the S3 beat Father Casey's.
Yeah, I hope we're hoping for the same result, but we'll wait on for Ballyseen for a minute. Then on Saturday, then you obviously have a relegation playoff as well as the quarterfinal between Ula and Galtee Gales. We'll talk a small about relegation afterwards, but on Ula and Galtee Gales, like, I think Galtee Gales, you often see it in Premier League, kind of a second season syndrome where a team is brilliant the first year and then falls by the wayside the second year. Galtee Gales have totally reversed that, and I know from first-hand experience how much they have improved, and I was I was talking to manager John McGrath afterwards, and he was just saying about the improvements they made in the league, and results might have been there, but he blooded a lot of players. And for me, like, even though Ula were in a final 2 years ago, like, I'd be really fancying Galtee Gales this weekend. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, you're right there about Galtee Gales. You would think that the second season syndrome would click in, but you're absolutely right when you say it has clicked in reverse. But I felt at the start of last year when Galtee Gales were struggling in the group stages, they actually lost to Ula in the opening round in their first game back at senior level last year. They subsequently lost to Ballylanders, subsequently lost to St. Kieran's, and then beat Drumcollar Broadford to preserve their status. Most of those games were very close now, Jack. Yeah. And I felt that they were only a game or a breakaway, from getting it right. But when they faced St. Kieran's in the first round in Martinstown this year, it was a massive game for Galtee Gales. Massive game for two reasons, in that they were idle the first day, because Ballysteen and St. Kieran's were involved in the first round. But they knew the permutations. Get a win. And apart from it being a first win, it ensured that they were safely into the quarterfinals, and they were above all safely out of relegation. That the spectre of relegation and the fear of relegation was gone. And and you saw against your own Ballysteen, and you were playing against them. They upped the performance considerably. Now, it was a very, very tight group, Jack.
Yeah, very,
very, very tight group. Ballysteen beat Kieran's by a point. Galtee Gales beat Kieran's by a point, and Galtee Gales beat Ballysteen by 3 points. If I'm correct.
5, unfortunately. I'd love to go correct.
Or 5, was it, Jack?
5, yeah.
Well, I didn't want to upset you by.
Yeah, no, I will get on to that, how close the group was, because St. Kieran's, like, with a point differential of -2 and in a relegation semi-final.
Yeah, that's the point I'm coming to, and making that point. And I know we'll be talking about Kieran's in the context of the relegation shortly, but it was a tight group. So, but after getting that win against St. Kieran's, the Gales were obviously liberated. Now we had the situation then with Ula, and I suppose if you were to get a draw from hell in the Limerick Football Championship, the name that should come out to be facing you in the first round is Adair. So they had, I won't say the pleasure, or what would you call it, something other than the pleasure of having to tackle Adair in the first round. And of course, they went down to Adair, and they subsequently were fortunate to get over in the Piersig by a point. Now, some of the main hurlers are not playing this year, like the Richie English, Darragh Donovan, Pat Ryan, I think are focusing solely on hurling and Doon's bid to finally make the breakthrough. So that is where Ula are at now. It's only 2019 that Ula took the Limerick Football Championship by surprise and by storm, by going all the way to the county final, where they lost to a Newcastle West team that they had beaten in the group stages. So this is going to be a hard one to call, but I'll call it when the time comes, Jack.
A strategic answer if I've ever heard one. Then we will talk to the relegation as a group. And on Sunday, then you have a double header of quarterfinals. Obviously, Ballysteen Adair in the Bog Garden, and then Newcastle and Claughaun in McNeville Park. We'll start with the McNeville Park fixture. And we spoke there about Galtee Gales. Our first year was tough for them. Claughaun, like are a senior side. Like, you'd always associate Claughaun with senior football. They were gone away for 10 years, but they've bounced back brilliantly. They beat Ballylanders, who were in the final last year in their first game, which is a daunting enough task. Now, they have obviously lost to Monaleen, which you touched upon, but they are facing Newcastle West, who in recent years, alongside Adair, have probably been that level ahead of everyone else. Like, how will Claughaun go about this game and try and upset the odds? Because they're definitely up against it here.
They're up against it. There isn't a doubt about that, but I think there will be a huge, palpable sense of relief in Claughaun, which I witnessed at the final whistle after the game in the Ballylanders game, when they like Galtee Gales were absolutely relieved that they had got the win, and that it practically assured them that they wouldn't be facing into a relegation squabble. So that was huge for them. So like Claughaun are one of the great. You rightly said there that they're one of the great clubs in Limerick, and it's not too long ago since 35 years ago since Claughaun completed the county double, senior hurling and senior football, which phenomenal success. Now they have fallen on hard times since in both codes, but the revival in the football. And this is the type of revival that I particularly like, Jack. And we spoke about it in the context of the emergence of Kildimo Palace Kennery. I think this Claughaun revival is based on pretty solid foundations, because it isn't as if they came from nowhere in 2020 to win the intermediate football championship. They have been serving notice, and they have been there or thereabouts for the last nearly 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't a question of will they, but when will they? I think, and the breakthrough came last year, and that was a very, very good result that they got, particularly in the county final, because they were up against the Gerald Griffin's team, who were on an atonement mission from the previous year, in that they had lost to Galtee Gales after a replay. So to many, they were, including myself anyway, they were outsiders going into that county final last year. I expected that Griffins would complete the job of winning promotion back to senior last year, but that isn't the way it happened. So I think what I would say is that I would think that Newcastle West will ignore the threat of Claughaun at their peril. I saw them against Ballylanders, a very, very good workman-like side, able to craft good scores, and crafted a couple of very good goals on that evening. And if you're a team out there that can create scores, create goals, and above all, Jack, take them, you're a long way there. But of course, Newcastle, are the team champions in 2019, then lost out to there last year. Through the group stages, they had a fortuitous enough win over Galway in the first round. Now, I personally was very, very disappointed with Newcastle West from what I saw them in the league final, and that disappointment was only enhanced and confirmed when I saw them in the first round against Galway, where they scrubbed through by 2 points, and like Galway had many people say they had a legitimate claim for a penalty right at the very, very end. Yeah. So that is how near that Newcastle West came. I'm not saying to being involved in relegation, but what I'm saying is that they came that near to providing a different narrative for us at this point. But then, of course, and we rightly flagged it here in this in our predictions for their game against Father Casey's, that like if anything was to focus Newcastle West and relaunch a serious bid for the championship, it would be a game against Father Casey's, and that's exactly how it transpired. And the question is, will they build on it now? I suspect that they will, because I believe that the talent is in the team. If you look at the Newcastle West team, all over the place, it's laden with talent. Even look at the bench behind you when we're down on the sideline covering their games. It's laden with talent. They have one of the most impressive and exciting panels in Limerick football, and that has been the case, Jack, for the last number of years.
Yeah.
And you would have said that they would have a panel that would have won certainly more county titles than they have won. That they've won 2. You know, had Newcastle picked up 4, 5, 6 county titles in the last decade, I don't think anybody would have been surprised.
No, the thing with Newcastle, they seem to have a bad day in them every year. Well, I don't know if you count the losses that they're in last year as a bad day. But certainly in 2018 they were heavy favourites against Ballylanders. They would have been heavy favourites against Adair in 2017 and lost to Lake Goal, and lost to Drum in a very, very poor semi-final in 2016 when they were champions. And like, just it was a horrible game, really. I remember it. It was a long time ago, but I still remember it. But
6 points, 6 points to 1-2, Jack.
Yeah, like the score 1-8 over the course of the game is mad. But I think football itself has transformed as a game in the time. But Clohan will be hoping that Newcastle will have an off day, but maybe that Galway game in the first day was their off day, and they're ran for row for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I would contend if there's one off day that Newcastle West have, per year. They've had 2 this year, because I felt I was hugely disappointed with Newcastle West in the league final, Jack. I know you can say it was the league final, but it was a properly structured league this year, and I was very, very disappointed, and very, very disappointed with him in particular, because as I flagged earlier on when we were talking about Monaghan were without Donald O'Sullivan. We know what Donald O'Sullivan brings to the table, and Brian Donovan, and now he came on in the second half. But I was fiercely disappointed with him, and again I was disappointed with him against Galway, because they certainly didn't measure up to what I expected. But I still felt in there was a team that couldn't be serious challengers for it. They had to be, unless we were misjudging the thing altogether. But I suppose they gave us a little snippet of what they're capable of against Father Casey's. I think I think it was kind of a message to tell all of us doubting Thomases, we're back.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever doubt Newcastle going into
not that they were ever away, but that we're not as bad as you think we are anywhere.
Yeah,
they got back to winning ways, Jack, emphatically.
And I suppose while Newcastle probably have threatened to win all around them, Adair have won 3 out of the last 4. They were beaten by Newcastle in the best game in Limerick football in a long, long time in 2019. And this weekend they play ourselves, Ballysteen. And look, it's not a case of the cuteness of Kerry to talk up your opponents, but for Ballysteen, you're up against the defending champions, 3 wins in 4 years. What is it, 2 losses since they got promoted? It's like Adair are the team to beat this year, and for Ballysteen, again, as I said, Cahan backs against the wall. For ourselves this weekend, Adair are heavy favourites is what I'm trying to say here, essentially, and they have a reason to be.
They have, in fairness, the forum suggests it, Jack. They have been they have been outstanding, absolutely, for the last 4 years. Even the one they lost, they've been outstanding. And as I said to you a couple of times in this cast, that my one big disappointment about it there last year was they didn't get an opportunity to benchmark themselves in Munster Championship football, because Munster Clubs Championship, because I thought they had given it a good shot the year before, the previous time that they were in it, and I felt that they were far more ready for it this time. And all those players are still around. And the thing we seem to forget about it there is that they seem to have been around and around at the top forever. They're so long there now, but they're like the Limerick Hurlers. They're still a very, very young team.
Yeah,
they made the breakthrough as a very, very young team, and they're exciting, and they play the type of football that you can watch all day long. But they're up against very tough customers, Jack, on Sunday. And there seems to be a different dynamic and a different type of momentum behind Ballysteen when it comes to the championship. We saw how close that they pushed when it comes to the knockout championship, we saw how close they pushed Newcastle West in 2019. Got all the way to the semi-final last year. And Father Casey's don't need reminding that they went into the semi-final as red-hot favourites and were comprehensively beaten. Was it 13 points to 8 or something like that, Jack, or 14 points to 8?
I think it was 14, yeah.
Yeah, but it was comprehensive anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, Palestine seem to take on a new life of their own when it comes to knockout football. Now, I know there are a couple of big names going to be missing. You're going to be missing the experience of Paranahan, who has an injury and has vast experience, and like you're going to be missing above all Danny Neville. We've said so many times what Danny Neville brings to the table. Absolutely, he's a huge lost 20 club. But I'm very slow. I hear people in the last week or so writing off Palestine completely and prepared to dance on their grave. I'm not prepared to do that at this stage.
No, your day below on Palestine has finally made you see the light. But we'll talk more when we get into predictions. But obviously, I'm going to go at my own club. But like it'll be an upset win if we can win on Sunday. But it should be a good game, and so should all 4 games. Like there's obviously favourites in every game that's going to be played, but like you'd imagine there's going to be some real high entertainment games. We'll come back to the senior football when we do our predictions, and we'll look at the intermediate football when we do our predictions. But just the Premier Junior quarterfinals run this weekend. We have Castleman, Croom, Montcollins, Atay, Monaghay versus Newcastle West, and Kilkeely Drumkeen versus Father Casey's. Just looking at those 4 fixtures, Matt, anything stand out for you, and who do you think will come through them?
Croom, Atay, Monaghay, and Kilkeely Drumkeen.
There you have it. I said from the start that Atay were my favourites to win this. I've not changed my mind on that, but a West Derby, Montcollins is a tough one. But like when you look at the amount of West teams there, it's mad. I wouldn't be great with geography there, but 6 out of the 8, and what I'm counting there. But I'd agree with you in all of those cases. Obviously, Monaghay got to the final. Well, I suppose this is the first year of Premier Junior, but Monaghay were Junior A finalists. I think Atay were caught by Cricora, who eventually won the championship. Moving on to the Junior A, then you have Benoa versus Brewery, Mungret versus Ballybrick and Bohermore, Phoenix Kilmeady versus Adair, and St. Pat's versus Camogie Rovers. And look, you don't want to just glance over these games, but the 4 names again, Matt.
I can tell you anyway, Jack. It's ticket only, and there will be precious tickets at Croom on Sunday morning for Bannog and Brewery. Great rivals, of course, and the greatest rivalry of all, of course, is between Brewery and Drummond-Atlacca. And Drummond-Atlacca and Bannog are combined in football, so that will give you a sense of what that is all about. I'm going for Brewery. I'm going for Ballybrick and Bohermore, Phoenix Kilmeady, and St. Patrick's.
Yeah, I'm going to go up Bannog in the first one to go against you there. I think Ballybrick and Bohermore will win as well, and so will St. Pat's. But I think Adair, I just the way the teams that are coming through, I know from the seniors team it's fairly established who's going to play and who's not. I'd still just fancy Adair, but we'll see. Obviously, we'll touch more when we get to semi-finals on them.
Yeah, there's just a cautionary note there in that as far as I recollect, in the 2020 West Junior B football final, you'll probably say, what has that got to do with it? But Phoenix Kilmeady, this same Phoenix Kilmeady and this same Adair team met in it, and Phoenix Kilmeady were red hot favourites, and Adair won it by a point.
Yeah.
So, Jack, there is some merit in what you're saying.
Yeah, sometimes I make sense. More often than not, I don't. Staying on the team of football, and we're back for a football weekend in the Tridental Ladies Football Championships, and I'll just throw up the fixtures here for you, Matt. Obviously, in the Senior Championship, Old Mill get their campaign underway against St. Ailbe's. St. Ailbe's obviously drew against Bellanders in the first round. Bellanders have a bye this weekend, and Monaghay, it's the first time we've seen the 2018 champions this year. They play Fiona Castleman, who are obviously huge winners in the first round. I'll just take that off the screen, Matt. We'll start with Old Mills versus St. Ailbe's. St. Ailbe's will be the favourites. Can you see any way that All Mill can come away with a win?
No, well, I think they'll find it difficult. It's their first day out. Ailbe's will have the advantage of a game under their belt. Ailbe's, of course, are going for 3 in a row this year. Now, they dug out a result against Ballylanders because Ballylanders were on the threshold of picking up the points in that game, and Ailbe's came back and drew. But the answer to your question is that I cannot. It's going to be very, very difficult. Now they have a good sprinkling of players, of well-known players in All Mill, like Limerick goalkeeper Sophia Hennessy, Roisin Ambrose, Iris Kennelly. Very good players. But have they enough of them against the power of Ailbe's? I suspect not, Jack.
No, and as well, they were intermediate champions 2 years ago, so still getting accustomed to the grade. Like, they haven't been in senior without a COVID season. You just fancy Ailbe's with that experience. Then the second game is probably more intriguing. Monaghan versus Fiona Castleman. Like, obviously Fiona Castleman were 7-20 to 1-1 winners over St. Bridget. It'll kind of clarify a lot this game at the weekend. Have Fiona Castleman improved that much, or were St. Bridget's just very poor in the day, or what's the scenario in that group really?
Yeah, I tried to get a fix on it since when we spoke about it, and I failed spectacularly to do so. I know I was busy now, and I didn't conduct an exhaustive inquiry into why, Jack. But there seems to be something wrong here, like 7-20 to 1-2. Like, it's very, very hard to imagine that Bridget's have fallen through the cracks to that level or to that extent, because like they're doing wonderful work over there, and they have a lot of players that have represented the county at different levels, and continue to represent the county at different levels, and it's. I thought they had made the transition from intermediate. They won the intermediate about 4 years ago, was it? And I thought they had bedded down into senior football, but it doesn't augur well. Like, if you suffer that kind of a defeat. Now, all right, you can say, look, it's one of those round robins where just like the Late Show, there's one for everybody in the audience. Everybody qualifies at the end of the day. It's only a grading exercise, if you like, or a seeding exercise. But to get that type of defeat, what it does for morale, I'd be seriously worried. But Jack, Monaghan was so near St. Ailbe's last year. Like Monaghan are very an absolute top side, and it'll be interesting. Of course, I suppose we will see that. I'm just wondering, of course. You had Fiona Castleman last year without Rebecca DeLee. And Rebecca DeLee is back on board this year. Unfortunately for her, she was ruled out in 2020 because of that horrendous injury she's received in the league against Tipperary. But thankfully for Limerick and thankfully for her clubs, that she's back on board, and she would certainly absolutely make a huge difference. But for me, Monaghan ticked an awful lot of the boxes. I thought they were unlucky in the county final last year. But it was Ailbe's just a little bit of extra guile and that little bit of experience that took them over the line. So I have a fancy here, even though that Fiona Castleman have a huge morale boosting victory and a game under their belt. I would fancy that I'd fancy that Monaghan will win this one, Jack.
Yeah, and it'd be very interesting as well, because I'd imagine a good few of the players will have played for Newcastle Camogie together over the weekend to see them up against each other. But as you said, it's only a grading, not only a grading exercise. You obviously want to win every game, but all 6 sides will go through. I'll get up those fixtures again for the intermediate championship. Drumcolor Broadford, who were obviously champions last year, opened their campaign against Ula, who were comprehensive winners over Knockany in the first round, and then Munger St. Paul's, who were obviously beaten by Drum last year, play Maru Boher, who opened their campaign How did you see that one going, Matt?
Yeah, Jack. Actually, would you believe that when I was looking at the fixtures in preparing my piece for the paper, I found myself far more excited about the potential of the games in the intermediate championship than I did in the senior championship this particular weekend, and that's no disrespect to them, because you have 4 decent teams out there, and you have 2 games that would be very, very difficult to call. Now, Drum Bradford are champions, and they play Ula. It's a fast emerging Ula side who are improving, and will really put it up to the champions. But I don't think they'll get over them this time. I'm fancying Drum Bradford to get off to a winning start. They have a very, very good team and a very, very good team behind them. So I fancy them. The second game is intriguing. We have Mungret St. Paul's, who were runners-up last year, and they're facing Marubor. Now, we know the number of players from Marubor that are part of the Limerick senior team at the moment, which you'd imagine gives them a head start. And of course, I suppose they're unique in many ways in Limerick football, and that in their past existence, not very, very long ago, that they have won an All-Ireland Clubs Championship. So, would you believe? I honestly think that Marubor might win this one. If you nail me to the crosses at where, Jack, I'd be going for Marubor.
Yeah, I just fancy Mungret in that one. Just we've spoken about a lot of championships that teams have come back from losing a final to win the following year. Now Mungret have obviously lost 2 finals in a row, which is different, but like eventually you will make that breakthrough, I think. And I think like Ger Griffin's intermediate football, that it could be Mungret's year. But they're as you said, they're fascinating ties. Looking at the other grades, then you obviously have the Junior A and Junior B Championship. Adair versus Ahan and Galtee Gales versus Atay. Adair and Galtee Gales were winners in the first round. Ahan and Atay open up their campaign, or Ahan begin their campaign. And in the Junior B Championship, you've Ula second side versus Croom. Croom are making their bow in the championship. Gerald Griffins versus Monaghan second side. Palace Green versus Ballylanders B. And then you've the meeting of Father Casey's and Drumcolours second side. We touched on these championships 2 weeks ago, Matt, just about having the B teams in it, and that you want to see more teams. But in the likes of Croom there, you have a relatively new team. Can they make a shock in the grade? Or
yeah, speaking to 1 or 2 people that are connected with it, there's certainly no lack of enthusiasm there, Jack, and no lack of enthusiasm to get the club up and get it into a solid footing. So I would be expecting that Croom will be contenders at that level. But the surprise there when you look at the Junior B Championship, Jack, is the fall from grace of Gerald Griffins. Down to Junior B. Like they've had such success in the past. Like it is some fall to see them down at Junior B level now, but whether they're contenders or not, I just don't know. But I think from an organisational point of view and from an enthusiasm point of view, I think Croom will be right up there.
Yeah, Ger Griffins obviously were beaten by Ula second side in the first round, so they'll be hoping to pick up a first win. And look, again, we'd love to go through all these games in great depth, but we have to focus on the knockout stages. And it's probably good in a way that the group stages of one championship are starting as the knockout stages in the others are on. So you can actually give the knockout stage games probably their fair due and talk about them in greater detail. That's the football for the weekend.
What about relegation, Jack? I was hoping you'd spare. I was hoping you'd spare me.
Well, I won't ask you to lay a prediction. I completely forgot relegation, and we'll just go on to the senior one, because obviously you will have a special connection to that. We'll go on to that secondly. Firstly, you St. Kieran's versus Na Piarsaigh. When I was doing a write-up for this during the week, and no disrespect to Na Piarsaigh, they're obviously dealing with a one-of-a-kind hurling side, and I don't think there's any crossover, or if there is, very little between the two sides. But they've been threatening relegation for a number of years now, and St. Kieran's have been stalwarts of the senior championship. Can you see Na Piarsaigh causing the upset, or will it be another relegation final for them?
I think it will. I think it will. Like you touched on it there. They're seeing a hurling team like they're special, Jack. I've seen them in both games. They are special. But having said that, like the Piercing play a very, very nice brand of football, which no matter what the circumstances are, whether it be championship, be it knockout or be it relegation, they don't compromise on it. And I have seen them in relegation in the past, and they have diced with relegation now in 3 of the last 4 years. So like you eventually fall through the cracks when you do that kind of thing. But they're going to make it awkward for St. Kieran's. Now, the one thing that we forget about St. Kieran's is that you can't forget that they lost both of their group games this year by a point. But Jack, you cannot also ignore the fact that they had an injury list from hell right through the campaign, which, that they will be hoping. And I'm talking about some of their top players now were missing through injury. And obviously they'll be hoping to have some of those back. But I'm going for St. Kieran's to do the business on at the weekend and condemn Na Piarsaigh into a relegation final.
Yeah, I can see past St. Kieran's, and after playing against them, and as you said with that injury list, they're very unlucky. They were 2 kicks of the ball away from being in a quarterfinal this weekend, and I think that's probably where they're at, and the Piarsaigh are probably the relegation is kind of where they're at these days. The other one then, obviously.
So will we go to the intermediate, so Jack?
I don't know if we've time to look at all the intermediate, but obviously Ballylanders versus Galway, a game close to your heart. And you spoke about the joy that Clenroe gave you at the weekend, but I suppose it's more fear this weekend with Ballylanders. But last year, Ballylanders were in the county final and Galway were in a county semi-final, and one of those sides will be in a relegation final after Sunday. After Sunday, it's mad. It can turn around. Our Ballylanders are in a relegation final in 17. We're obviously in the final the following year, but it's not a place you want to be, and it's a very, very hard game to call.
Very, very hard game because you have the dynamic of near neighbours, and you talk about near neighbours. These are clapped up against each other. Like the villages of Ballylanders and Galway are less than 3 miles apart. That'll give you an idea of how close they are. And to a point, Ballylanders is surrounded because, as you know, Galway and Garryspillane are joined in football. Every place they look around them, there is evidence of Galway. Look, there can be no excuses, Jack. Galway and Ballylanders are contesting the semi-final of the relegation playoff because they couldn't even pick up a single point between them in the group stages of the competition. And that represents to me a huge fall from grace for teams that were, as you rightly pointed out, both of them contested the semi-finals last year and one of them contested the final. All right, you can put it down to hard luck, you can put it down to this, that, and the next thing, but that type of thing shouldn't in reality be happening, Jack. But it is what it is, and they've got to face up to it. It's going to be a very, very difficult game to call. Ballylanders have had the upper hand in recent years, particularly when it came to the South Senior Football Championship. There hasn't been many great other titanic battles between them, but if you ask me to make a prediction, and it's my heart and my head thinking in the one way this time, I think that Bally will just shade it.
Yeah, Ballylanders aren't a side that I'd want to meet in relegation playoff, but either are Galway. I'm not going to keep track of predictions for that, so I'm just going to leave myself out of that before I prove myself a fool again. But they're titanic battles, and it just shows the close nature of the senior football championship, and it probably doesn't get the hype that the hurling does, and that's fair because the hurling is probably a different level. But like, you wouldn't see Na Piarsaigh in a relegation final in the hurling, whereas you could see any team in the relegation for the football. It makes it that more even and that bit more open. Like, but
you see, this COVID thing has changed everything so much. Who would have thought that we'd have Cork and Limerick contesting the All Ireland senior hurling final? And we had, and now who would think the Ballylanders and Galway after last year would be contesting the relegation semi-final?
Yeah, and that's
the only redeeming feature for Ballylanders and Galway, Jack, is that it's a semi-final. The loser has another chance.
Yeah, I'll remain on the fence for them. We've 50 minutes on the clock already.
A Galtee Galesman said to me recently, he was decrying the fact that the Galway and Ballylanders were in relegation. He said here in the south for years we were trying to get the three teams up, and now when there's two of them, three of them are up. He said there's two of them now in relegation, but he said thank God at least one of them will be safe after the first game.
Yeah, we'll be guaranteed to have two South teams. We could even have a South winner for 2022. But we've 51 minutes now on the clock of football. We still have to do predictions, but just to turn our attention to Camogie and hurling for a few minutes. We obviously had the kickoff in the Camogie Championships last weekend. I'll get the results up there. We can just discuss them. There was wins for champions Killeedy, a narrow win over Ballingarry. There was a draw for the last two winners of the Intermediate Championship. But there, the striking result is the first you see. Newcastle West 220, Ahan 1-3. Newcastle weren't long laying down a marker, were they?
No. I think probably that they made an early statement, like because this was a battle of the 2019 and 2018 champions.
Yeah, and 19 final.
Sorry, I repeated. The 2019 final. But it was a massive win for Newcastle West. But I can't say I'm awfully surprised. Because when you see the players that they have at their disposal, and I mentioned earlier on about the return of Rebecca Lee, of Karen O'Leary, the Limerick captain there, and you have the Lees, and you have an awful plethora of very, very good players, but it seems to be a bit of a fall from grace I suppose it's a combination of two things. That result, Jack, is that Newcastle West are driving on, and that there's a certain fall off in the on the part of Ahan. Now Crocora and Bruff, 6 points all, a draw. Suppose both sides would be entitled to be happy. I saw Bruff last year in the county final. At that stage, they thought they'd be playing intermediate again last year, or this year, that there was no promotion. I thought it would have been a travesty if that was the case, because I felt it was an opportunity for them, and that they were fit enough to make the step up, and at least they've got a point out of it, and they will probably be happy enough. But we shouldn't ignore the significance of the third result there. Killeedy 10 points, Ballingarry 9 points. Like, this is a star-studded Killeedy team. We see the number of players that they provided to the county senior and the county intermediate teams. But like, there's a huge tradition of Camogie down in Ballingarry, and they are the queens of the code at club level in this county, and by God, they really put it up to them. And you had the like of Sarah Carey back, and somebody that we all know in this business, the county PRO and Limerick's 2014 All-Ireland winning captain Fiona Hickey made her return after giving birth to Cahill during the summer, and kept a clean sheet. Returned in gold.
Not many people can say they've achieved that. There was some,
against the star-studded Killeedy forward line.
Yeah,
you must remember Valerie Shanahan was on that, who scored goals for fun. during the All-Ireland Junior Championship this year, but did not beat Fiona.
Yeah, Like, look, again, we'll be talking about it next week, the results. Again, first round, early doors, Newcastle laid out a statement, but Killeedy got the win. Kilcorey and Bruff probably aimed for that game and got a draw, so both of them can be relatively pleased. Just looking at results elsewhere, Maru Boher had a 7-point win over Ballygran. Killeedy beat Newcastle West second side 2-13 to 1-7. Last year's losing finalists, Cappamore, started with a win over Monaleen, and Temple Glanton were 4-point victors over Crow Kilfinney in a goal fest. Moving on to the junior championship then, Calbally were 6-13 to 4-11 winners over Blackrock Effin in another goal fest, and Adair were big winners over Patchwell 2-21 to 2-9 in the junior A. I have it both down as junior A, that should be junior B. Granville and Gary Knockaderry played out a draw. Doon had a big victory over Ballybrown. Kilmallock had 3 points to spare over Turnafulla, and Bruff beat Monaleen. And in the 12 side then, Killeedy were big winners over Munger St. Paul's. Cricora had a big win over Ahan. And Matt, before the second round next week, we'll look at those games in depth. I'm just aware that we've nearly an hour on the clock and we've more to do. But was there any standout results there, or is it a bit early to tell?
A bit early to tell. Cappamore runners up last year. That was an impressive result, but I think an equally impressive result there was the result of Temple Danton beating Crow Kilfinney. Temple Danton are fastly emerging as a camogie force, and they've come up the hard way through the ranks. And of course, they have the Curtin sisters and Stephanie Wolf to lead the charge, so they could be in a good place. And certainly, I would see them as potential contenders along with Cappamore, and possibly I wouldn't write off Crow Kilfinney either at this point.
Yeah, look, it's definitely early doors to be writing off a team. That's the camogie that started over the weekend. Obviously, it's every second week with the ladies football. The football is this weekend. We'll have camogie again next weekend. We spoke last week. Just it's a brilliant system. Now there probably could be a bit of burnout for dual players, but in the COVID season, that can't really be helped. Moving on to the hurling, and I don't want to talk too much about the hurling because we'll do it in full next week anyway with return of the hurling. And we might even have to have a second show, Matt, with just everything that's on. But we've the Piercing and Doon into the semi-finals. They topped their groups. Doon had a win over Ahan, and the Piercing were big winners over Ballybrown. And you spoke about the quality in the Piercing. And then we have two mouth-watering quarter-final ties next weekend. Adair, Patrickswell, and Kilmallock, South Liberties. Just on the Piercing performance, are they still your favourites after the weekend?
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. Absolutely.
They've done more to cement that status.
They were without 7 players. They were without 6. Against Kilmallock, that number had stretched to 7. Against Ballybrown, I thought they were absolutely efficient in the way that they went about their business. I would say that, it's debatable how far below their best that they were, but they certainly were well below it, in my opinion. There's another notch in them which is awesome, and I think that the injury list I'm hearing may be about to shorten some bit, and it will give you an idea of the bounty of riches that Kieran Birmingham will have at his disposal when he'll come to pick the team to play against whoever they'll play in the semi-final. And it's quite evident to me that the people that have come in replace of those that are out injured, they jealously want to hold on to the jerseys, because I was very, very impressed with the performance of Emmett McAvoy. He has played 2 games now, and he certainly stepped on last Saturday night. I was impressed with Sean Long, who came on as a sub against Kilmallock and started the other night, and I was hugely impressed, Jack. I was hugely impressed with the performance of Keith Dempsey, the younger one of the Dempsey brothers. And just mentioning the Dempseys, we did say at the outset of this competition, Jack, that we were talking about the way David Dempsey lit up the championship. In my view, in 2020, he's done it already in 2021. And we're not into the semi. We're only into the quarterfinals. I think he had a game for the ages last Saturday evening. I think he ended up with 2-4, but all from play. But apart from that, and it wasn't just what he put beside his name, it was the contribution, Jack, that he made around the field was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and we did say that David Dempsey was a standout player in the championship last year, and he is every year, and he scores goals for fun for an Pearshig. And we just have a comment in there from, I don't know if it's a real account or a fake account, but it said, green flags Mulcahy with another goal, lads. That's, I presume, referring to Niall Mulcahy in Mungret. They made a 3 from 3 in the Premier Intermediate. They were the only team to do so. They're into the semi-finals.
Yeah, he has 5 goals from 3 games. He plays Glenroe in the next round. Will the run continue?
I don't know. They're against Glenroe. I'm sure you'll be hopeful that it won't continue. And obviously the other semi-final then is Newcastle West versus Cappamore. And as I said, we'll look at all these games in depth next weekend. But they're on next weekend. Like I don't know what the original fixture list was. Was it to have the football run out? But the hurling is on again next weekend. And then I'm just looking at it here on my screen. The quarterfinals in the Intermediate Championship. Croom, Granaballangary, Brewery versus Palace Green, Kilfinney, last year's Junior A champions against last year's losing finalists in the Pearshig, and then Knockaderry versus Effin, and all the relegation semi-finals, and all those fixtures are on the website there if you want to just check them out. But again, we'll be touching on them in great detail.
It's a massive weekend, and it's a massive weekend this weekend, and again next weekend, and spoiled for choice, but it has been precipitated by the advent of COVID. But what it's doing, Jack, at the moment, and I have found it in the last 2 weeks, and you probably have found it as well, it's generating a debate among the ordinary fans anywhere about the wisdom of the split season. I've heard a number of people talking about it, because it's mainly, I have to say, one person even actually rang me about it. It's mainly brought about by the fact that there are so many big matches on together, and that, the fella that goes to them 3 matches every weekend, he's missing. He feels he's missing out, or he or she feels that they're missing out on an awful lot. And the split season is fine if the GA are not wedded to having the All-Ireland finals in August, because in many ways it will mean that it won't be a split season as such. It would be 7 and 5, and again the clubs would be somewhat curtailed and condensed. And I think there's a genuine desire from talking to clubs around the county to give us back the championship that we used to have, particularly at senior and at the intermediate levels, where you had 6 in a group and 5 games. I think that there is a desire out there for that. But if this split season is to continue on the way that it was this year, that will hardly be possible, Jack.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You want to see as many games as possible, but I think the split season suits the players more. It's kind of a catch-22. We play if you play GA all year round, but it's just not feasible for players that are playing with their county to be playing all year round. Like, they have to get their rest as well. But it's a debate for another day. We have, look, to be fair to Limerick, and we say it every week, they've ran off their championships without a glitch so far for 2 years running, and they have all their fixtures laid out already over a week and a half in advance, just so people can get ready and teams can prepare and do their due diligence. But again, we'll talk about the hurling next week in full. As I said, we might even have to do a separate one just for the hurling, and then a one for look back on the football. But that's next week's problem, or not problem. That's for next week. We'll move on to my favorite part, which is the predictions. I'm still slightly ahead, Matt, after last weekend. Again, you closed the gap with an extra win. We both said in the Pearshig and Doon. I went for Kildimo, Palace, Kenry. They lost by 2 points at Dare. You had a Dare. We both said Mungret. We both said your beloved Glenroe. I did fancy Bruff to get a win before the relegation final, and they did just that against Newcastle West. And obviously, Cappamore victorious over Mrubohor. You called that. I went the other way. Going into this weekend, Matt, it'll be all about the football. We'll do the 8 games between the Senior Football Championship and the Intermediate Football Championship. So we'll start with, as we did earlier, in order, and you can discuss more about the Senior and you can talk about the Intermediate because we totally bypassed that earlier on. But starting with Casey's versus Monaleen, who will win and by how much?
Monaleen by 3.
Monaleen by 3, as easy as that. I better take note of this. I've gone the other way. I've gone for Father Casey's. We've talked about Monaleen a lot, I think, over the years, and they've failed us. I'm saying that now, if they hear this, they'll have another bit of motivation. But I think Father Casey's, just with that first round win against Galway, I know how good Newcastle can be. I just think they haven't been in a semi-final in a while. They'll rue that loss to Ballysteen last year. I'm just going with Father Casey's. Then on Saturday, Galtee Gales versus Ula. I said earlier, I think Galtee are favourites. I'm going to go for a 1 point Galtee Gales win.
2 Gales.
And it would be a great achievement for Galtee to get into a semi-final.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
And then talking about achievements, Newcastle West versus Clahan's first year to get into the semi-final.
I'm going for Newcastle West by 4 there, Jack.
Yeah, I have Newcastle West by 5. Just like the experience tells a lot in these games, and for Clahan to avoid the relegation altogether and to get a knockout stage game in their first year back, it's a huge achievement.
Huge, absolutely.
And then obviously we have Ballysteen versus Adair. You know which way I'm going. I'm going for a 1 point Ballysteen victory. Will you go against us again?
Is there any facility in this contest for passing?
No, your day out in Ballysteen done now, so you don't have to worry about offending us anymore. You were called
unfortunately, until Alan Keogh, I'll buy him a pint if I'm wrong. I'm going for Adair by 3.
Adair by 3. Yeah, look, Adair are favourites, but you have to go with your own, and I think there's a result in Ballysteen, and hopefully it'll be proved right.
They're tough customers, and Adair will be very, very, very aware of that.
Yeah, they'll definitely be aware of it, I suppose.
Because it's part of the success of Adair is that they don't underestimate anybody, and they're totally professional about how they go about their business.
Yeah, hopefully they'll do a bit of underestimating this weekend, and we can take advantage of it. But look, 4 great games. You can see by the winning margins there that they promise to be close encounters. Then the 2 results, we've gone different ways. In the Intermediate Championship, then you've Rathkeale versus Drumbrodford, and this would have been a senior fixture as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. Realistically,
2017 was a senior fixture.
Yeah. Rathkeale were obviously relegated that year, and Drum went down last year. Who will be making that step closer to getting promoted again?
I think Rathkeale. I'm giving Rathkeale by a point.
Rathkeale by a point. I've Rathkeale by 1 point, or I've Rathkeale by 2. You've Rathkeale by a point. It's very touch and go.
Very, very, very touch and go.
And another one I think is extremely touch and go is Mungret St. Paul's versus Kildare Palace Kinnery, and I think a lot of it has to do with Kildare Palace Kinnery's lost Adair in the hurling. Now I know they have a county cup final, but in the grand scheme of things, I think this game is probably more important for the club as a whole. They'll have their hurlers back. They'll probably have their 2 All-Ireland winning hurlers as well, who are well able to play football, and we saw them in the junior championship in 2018. I'm still going for Mungret but just by a point in this city derby.
I'm going with Mungret by 5.
By 5?
Yes.
That's a comprehensive one. I think we kind of single out Mungret as one of the favourites earlier in the year, but I think Kildare having the hurlers does make them that more potent, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kildare won it, but they're both going for Mungret. The next 2 games I think are more straightforward. You have Gerald Griffins versus Bruff. We'd single out Gerald Griffins as the early favourites. You can't really go against them this weekend.
Griffins by 6.
Yeah, I have Gerald Griffins by 10, and that's no disrespect to Bruff, but just that's where the teams are. And then St. Senans versus Palace Green. St. Senans alongside Gerald Griffins were probably the most comprehensive team in the group stages. I've gone for Senans by 8. It's a lot, but I just fancy their scoring power.
No, I have more respect for Palace than Palace are dogged. They're dogged side when they come to the knockout championship. I'm going for Sinnons, but I'm only going for Sinnons by 4, Jack.
Sinnons by 4. Yeah, no, I like that. Again, any result I put down, it's not to go with any disrespect intended for any team. I just think St. Sinnons have a lot of scoring power, and have been thereabouts for a lot of years. We're obviously senior as recently as 2019, I'm going to say, the year they got relegated, whereas Palace probably haven't been.
Absolutely, yeah. And you recall that the previous year, actually, their first year up in 2018, they were distinctly unlucky to miss out on the quarterfinals on scoring difference.
Yeah.
Which could have changed what we're talking about now. You know, had they qualified for the quarterfinals that year, but they slipped into relegation then the following year. So, you know, they have been dicing with it up there now.
They actually drew with it there that year in Newcastle and had a man sent off. And I remember they gave Adair a very soft goal, and Adair were defending champions at the time and went on to win the championship. So, very, very fine margins in the football in Limerick. We'll probably leave it at that, Matt. I don't think there's anything else we're missing. We've been on now for an hour and 10. So much gotten through. Probably a lot we've missed. We can only apologise for that. But you have to focus on the upper tiers. There'll be previews on the website. Matt will have previews in the papers as well for anyone that wants more. But I think we'll leave it there, Matt. Again, many thanks to you, and hopefully we can see each other again this weekend. I missed you last weekend. I had to go away just after you had finished launching the book to go to Adair and Palace Kenry. But hopefully it'll be wins for Ballysteen and Ballylanders this weekend. But
and we'll have broad smiles then next week, Jack.
Yeah, and for everyone that has tuned in,
we might be. Hopefully, we'll be in the Cougar.
Yeah, hopefully. Actually, I forgot about that. You didn't have to watch all the videos this week.
We've promised that the podcast will be in the Cougar if we win the Cougar, either one of us.
Yeah, please God. But anyways, a huge thanks to everyone that has tuned in. Next week we could have 2 podcasts. It depends what the fixtures are like for the football. If football is played next weekend, we'll have a whole host of games that we won't be able to have one podcast. Whether you like that or that's good news for you or bad news. I wouldn't mind talking about the games in more detail. But again, a huge thank you to you, Matt, and to everyone that tuned in, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
The impression the game you get out with what you put into. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods, and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well, Johnny Buckley. To do that to Tommaso Sheahy, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there